This is Wednesday Words for November the 12th, 2025, here on Following Him, the Disciple Life. The word for today is Todah. Yes, that is what I said. Todah. Not ta-da, but Todah. We are starting with the original language and working our way back to the English again, in this case, Hebrew. So that means we're talking about the Old Testament, since the Old Testament was primarily written in Hebrew, a little bit written in Aramaic. The word Todah is the word that is being translated when we see the word thanksgiving in our English translations. Now, this word Todah, which is commonly translated as thanksgiving, can also be translated as confession. And we see it translated that way in Joshua 7:19. This Hebrew word does share a root with the Hebrew word for to acknowledge. So this makes sense from a larger philosophical, theological standpoint when we really consider what Thanksgiving is. You know, a lot of people, you hear the word Thanksgiving, and they think about it as the name of a holiday that has a lot of association with turkey. And they don't stop and really break down the word. It's in many ways kind of lost a lot of meaning to people. But the reason that holiday has that name is because that holiday was about the giving of thanks. But even just saying the giving of thanks doesn't completely touch on, what that is. At least probably doesn't immediately to our minds. Oftentimes the giving of thanks, it can be just a formality for somebody or just something nice to do. But it's about more than a polite formality. It's about more than just something nice to do. It is about acknowledging, once again, it shares, that Hebrew word shares roots with the Hebrew word for acknowledge. It acknowledges that someone has done something you didn't, that someone has given you something that you didn't have, that it's acknowledging something outside of yourself. That's why a selfish person, the giving of thanks, it's not going to come as easily. And from a theological standpoint, in consideration of God, when we're talking about the giving of thanks, that it is an acknowledgement, a confession that He has given us that which we cannot ultimately obtain from ourselves, particularly when it comes to our salvation. So, Todah. Make sure I'm accenting that last syllable properly. Todah, that is the Hebrew word that translates as thanksgiving, but it can also be translated as confession. So when you think about the concept of thanksgiving, think of it as a confession of, if you're talking about a person, the efforts of another, that you're acknowledging they did what you didn't in some form or fashion, even if it's something you could have done, but you didn't. They did. And from a theological standpoint, in consideration of God, that it is a confession, particularly when we're talking about thankfulness for our salvation, for God's grace and things of this nature. It's a confession of what God does for us that we cannot do for ourselves. You have a great rest of the day, and shalom.